Still here, February 14, 2023. It's now 2:05 p.m. I was winding up, but something just hit me like a rock. And I wanted to get it out there and more food for thought and to show to Jamaicans and people generally how a few corrupt people, how a few people with criminal intent can put your country in jeopardy and put your privacy in jeopardy, put your sovereignty in jeopardy. Because one of the things I'm going to say, and again, Jamaicans and Jamaica and most of these islands and countries who are independent have been fighting tooth and nail about privacy issue as it relates to people's money and their assets and the access that first world countries want to have in the information on people's banking account, for example. And I know, it has been a major contention amongst people, sovereign people, in different countries, that U.S. authorities want to know what you have in your banks. And well, fortunately for some who believe that the U.S. should know to fight corruption and money laundering and terrorism, they've been trying to get access to accounts for decades. And a few criminals just opened the door and allowed the government to give them an open invitation to come in and see everybody's accounts. Because the investigation is not as narrow as most of us would think. And I would imagine if I were the FBI and US authorities, I am now in a position to delve into all the records that are interconnected into the local banking system and find out who has what where, how many dollars you have here, and then see where you got it from. So persons who have been ducking and hiding their resources are trying to keep it private, quote unquote. Those criminals that robbed Mr. Bolt and other people, and those criminals were operating in the banking system and committing fraud, and those criminals that law enforcement has been negligent in putting under wraps and incarcerating them in the courts, and the courts having corrupt individuals who won't do their jobs, and then in one hand letting criminals go and allowing people to commit fraud, and on the other hand cheating innocent bystanders and people who come to them for relief. These persons have opened the door and given a golden key to an agency, an organization, and country that they've been trying tooth and nail to prevent from accessing banking records here in this country, Jamaica. As I say, either way, I am not upset because, again, a lot of these people have been ducking and using the local institutions to hide money can now be discovered because a lot of the people who have major banking transaction and accounts here got their money illegitimately, and some of them are involved in from gun running to other illicit acts. My concern is not so much about people who sold ganja or made money out of ganja, because from when I was growing up, I used to wonder how they're locking up people for ganja, something that grows wild. And when I got more mature and more educated and more exposed, I came to realize again, why are they locking people up on a lie? Because in the courts, of course, you can't go into court and the court rule in favor of telling a lie. And what they've done, they classified marijuana or ganja or whatever they call it now, Mary, Jane, they classified it as a dangerous drug, a class one drug, I think it is, whichever, a dangerous drug. And in truth and in fact, science has long proved that it isn't. So in reality, those persons who are in prison and all of that for dangerous drugs, one of the techniques that your attorneys have failed to use over the decades to fight off that conviction is that the courts cannot support a lie. And the scientific evidence is there to say marijuana or ganja is not a dangerous drug, so it was deliberately classified as one in order to put people in prison. So even at the federal level, those persons fighting um, federal laws on marijuana, which eventually the feds will lift. I don't know why they're hesitating or dragging their feet, but for whatever reason, politics. But the attorneys, I'm not talking about U.S. attorneys, nor I'm not giving legal advice. But I'm saying if I were an attorney, because when I recognized that marijuana was misclassified decades ago, I said, these attorneys seem to, especially because I heard a Jamaican attorney once said he moved into the Montego Bay area because ganja was a big thing in the courts here, and people were so engaged in ganja that he wanted a piece of the action representing these people. However, in representing these people, it wasn't about getting them off. It was about getting the fees because under the law they would have them locked up anyway. If you catch them and they're going to jail and they have the ganja, they're doing the time or they're paying the cost. So their thing was just to collect the money, be there, and give the impression that they're doing a good job at delivering arguments to ease their clients' pain when in truth and in fact there is nothing they could do because the law was in place and they have to go according to the law. The court can't overturn the law. However, also came to the conclusion, now wait a minute, why aren't these attorneys who are taking people's money in defense of being busted for ganja or growing ganja? Why aren't these attorneys in court at the Supreme Court and the Appeals Court and even the Privy Council fighting it on the basis, the scientific basis that ganja is not a dangerous drug? Could that have been a scam? These attorneys scamming these drug dealers who deal in ganja for decades, taking their money, knowing that they didn't do anything to defend them because there was nothing they could do. And yet, instead of pursuing a defense along the lines of an illegality in the courts, because classifying or misclassifying anything in court deliberately itself is an illegal act and wrong, and the court cannot make a decision in support of any fraudulent illegality or act. That's just the law. That's just the constitution. That's based on previous authority. Even though I've said to you before, every case must be tried on its own merits. But all these ganja cases, attorneys needed to address it on the matter of right and wrong. And the court was wrong in enforcing a law that was wrong in it being written, regardless of who wrote it. And a lot of our politicians here, because I remember when they were considering legitimizing it or legalizing it in Parliament, I remember it was politician Mr. Nicholson. He has a whole bunch of white gray hair, almost like mine if I had it on. Said he was waiting to see what the big boys, referring to international organizations or other sovereign companies were going to do. I was embarrassed when I heard that, obviously. But that said, he was waiting on the big boys, while in the big boys' country, states were legitimizing and legalizing ganja so that people could use it, whether for recreational or medical. The fact is, all right, so we stepped in that direction, but we're still prosecuting people for ganja. We're still raiding people's fields and tearing it down and taking them away for ganja instead of focusing on other things like corruption. And I'm saying to each and every attorney out there who say they are criminal attorneys, you should go apologize to your clients and go in there and fight the defense of use or production of ganja on the basis that the law is a lie. It's not a dangerous drug. And the United States of America long tested that, ran the experiments, and it's evidence in federal records that ganja is not a dangerous drug. So we shouldn't have to wait on the US to correct that before we do it. Because they're going to correct it. It's just a matter of economics. Right now, most of the states are engaging in making it legal. And as soon as everybody recognizes and the feds recognize the kind of money they could be getting out of it for taxes, then that's what's going to do it. The only thing business people understand or people who want to make big money in terms of the government and the running government is taxes. So as soon as the feds recognize how much money they could be making or how much money they're losing, not having this thing legal and collecting taxes, it's going to change it. But I'm just going over that, not to be here talking about ganja. I'm just pointing out that when you have bad representation in a system where that's based on truth, then we always end up with the lie taking the place of justice. So again, just pointing to the fact and saying to Jamaicans and people all over, when you have people who are undermining your society, doing their little thing or doing their big thing, and it's corrupt and it's wrong and it breaks the law, and that action cause a foreign entity or sovereign government to come in and have access to the information, private information, financial information, banking information of all Jamaicans, then I see that as a national crisis. For me, I don't care. I'm just saying from a from a philosophical position and a political position, one who believes in sovereignty. Then the government should have thought this through before an invitation was sent. Now that the feds have the invitation and they're in there, I don't blame them. Check everything they can. Check up on everybody. And if the feds weren't thinking of that, which I doubt, because again, I love sophistication. And I've always said, let's become more sophisticated. Because if we were, we would have done our own investigation, would have put these people in prison on our own, and we have to be relying on a sovereign entity. That said, if the feds weren't doing it, guess what? I'm suggesting that this is an opportunity for you to take advantage of it and identify people who have a ton of money that can't be explained, especially if it's coming out of illegal activity like importing guns, selling guns, trading in violence, trading in human misery, and not caring who they hurt. And I'll point out again, these are small numbers of people in a nation, in a country. And the majority of people in the country have to stand up and make a difference. As I've said to you before, I remember the days when criminals used to come into our community and rob it or try to rob it. And they would be dealt with, and people would be hesitant to pull those stunts ever again in those communities. But we've got to a place where we rely on people who really don't care and use that opportunity to foster the growth of corruptibility, by a reliance on them and not on ourselves. So again, just a word, a thought that it just occurred to me that a few criminals thieving people's stuff in a financial institution ended up opening the door, the floodgates of inquiry into the nation's banking and financial system. Because if you're checking out SSL, those people in SSL have money and accounts in other institutions. And I'm really thinking if I were the feds, I'd be looking at where this money went. If it went over to NCB, I want to see what's happening over in NCB. Because we're literally asking the feds to do a full audit of our system. because we're so dumb we can't do it ourselves. But we have all these accountants in Jamaica. I don't know. Jamaicans, we need to, look into ourselves and decide: do we want to be an independent nation? Do we want to be a protectorate of the United States? Do we want to be a state of the United States? I doubt if they'd want us, but seem like they have us right now as a state of the United States, a protectorate, because we're technically relying on them to do everything for us. They have to track the guns coming in. They have to track the illegal money coming in and going out. They have to come in physically on the island, on the ground, to track criminals operating in Jamaica. Not outside Jamaica now, operating in the island of Jamaica. We have to have U.S. authorities on the ground operating in Jamaica. What about our police? What we're paying them for? What we have all these guys, Mr. Anderson, Anthony Anderson, doing? Is law enforcement a part of our business or isn't it? Just thinking, just saying, what are we going to do about us being an independent nation? Are we really independent? I'm going to say to my people again, Jamaicans, that strive to empower ourselves or yourselves intellectually, educationally, and so that you could get out and see the rest of the world by virtue of being qualified. One of the things I'd like to suggest is do a research on jobs that are needed in the future, jobs that are in demand and undersupplied by workers or professionals. There are plenty of them out there, and get training in those areas. And if you're not a person who is in a university or have the capability of going to a university for whatever reason, look into traditional traditional skills areas, whether it's carpentry, mechanics, all of that stuff, because those are things that are in demand. But that shabby thing that they keep doing in Jamaica about their professionals, you need to clean up your act. And government needs to look into those areas and get these people out when they get really qualified and certified. If you can't find it here and you want to really be a technical person, then try and find a country where you have really skilled technicians in those areas, those craftsmen, and go learn the craft from them. Apply to institutions over there and go learn. Become master plumbers, master um, carpenters, master furniture builders or cabinet makers. Become master mechanics. Understand what's going on in terms of technology and all of that. And those are tools, believe it or not, you can use to get out of this country, Jamaica, as quickly as you can, even faster than people who go to university and have a degree. People who are professional drivers, truck drivers, and in demand around the planet. People who are welders, electricians, plumbers, they are in demand, throughout the world, including Canada. So again, just a side thing, because I say I'm working to see if I could help to make Jamaica a better place. And if a lot of these young people who are committing crimes or involved in crime want to create an opportunity and not have an excuse to say there are no opportunities and therefore there's no hope and I have to go to really dangerous methods and systems of trying to survive or live or raise a family, then there are options. And again, I've always said, when you do have these opportunities, don't let people come and then try to influence you to go along the wrong path. It's not a safe route to take for sustainability, for longevity, or for a healthy lifestyle for either you or your family. Because once you commit a crime and you do it in aid of somebody else, then they own you. All right. So think of all of that before you act. Because part of my mission is not only to identify the ills in society or the corruption in society, but to also point out to people, and young people especially, with educational institutions, these are areas that you should also focus on. When you have these career week things going on in high schools and all of that, do a research in the international market so that you can offer people the opportunity to go to those areas of study and offer those study areas to people so they can get out. Lose this nonsense about brain drain. We can't sustain the population. So we need to train people and give them the training to go. Whether they get trained as nurses, teachers, or whatever, train more. Let them go. Because if we don't, we're going to end up with people considering doing all these illegal things, undermining the sovereignty of their country so that other countries can come in and you lose all of that you claim you're independent. And though I'm mentioning the money side of things and the US, I'm also going to say be careful of the kind of deals government is making with Asian countries, especially China, because it's one thing to get stuff from China, but when China is one of the identified as one of the world's greatest human rights abuser, we're contributing to abuse of Chinese in China and other people all over the world. I looked at a documentary on Chinese firms in Ethiopia, and you could go and research it in North Ethiopia. And not only are they undermining or underpaying these people, the verbal and physical abuse is totally intolerable. And we should not stand by and allow our people to be abused. They're literally slaves. And we should say to our governments around the globe, stop it. You can pass laws that force these people to pay people a living wage because the stuff they make, then send it all over the world to sell. They're selling for 10 times what it's built for, if not 1,000 times, making tons and tons of profit, increasing those profits annually. So again, we have to be careful, and as sovereign, I should qualify that as a sovereign, so-called independent nation. Is either we're going to remain independent and sovereign by taking care of our business, or we just give it up and invite in the US to come in and take. Because we definitely don't want to go to China or any of those organizations or countries. All right. So thank you. You have a great one. I'm getting a call. I'm gonna take it. Have a good one.